Everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad I'm doing another one of these double eye swipes. I haven't called it one of these in freaking so long. But I figured, you know what, time to bring it back. And I actually have a playlist called Double Eye Swipe, Is It Still Worth It In? And it's on my playlist on my channel. So if you guys want to go through all those videos and see all these videos that I'm doing, then go be my guest. But today we're going to be talking about the Samsung Galaxy S6 Edge and seeing how it holds up in 2019. Now, this is one of those phones that Samsung made that's still not supported. So unfortunately, it got unsupported a couple of years ago, actually, or maybe last year. I don't really remember. But we will find out by the end of this video. But looking around the body, you can tell that this phone is still super premium, okay? This is one of the greatest things about Samsung phones, like circa around 2015. This is when Samsung went from the plastic build with the removable backs and everything to the more premium glass on the back, full metal, all that good stuff. Now, this is not perfect though, because they did remove the removable battery and removable storage, so it wasn't a huge success in my opinion. They ended up selling a lot of units, but it wasn't really crazy stuff, and that kind of sucked a little bit because I'm a person who loved the removable back and the removable storage. But the fact that Samsung took it away was so stupid, and that's something I never really held down, and I'm still kind of mad about Samsung about that, but it's all good. The screen is 5.1 inches, it's Super AMOLED, it's 1440p, and this thing is super intense. I love this thing so much. The panel on even older Samsung devices are still good. I think the Galaxy S5 panel still isn't that bad. Even the Galaxy S4, I just had it here not too long ago. The panel itself isn't horrible. I don't know what they put on the front, glass or plastic. It's a mix of both. It does not feel that good or premium, but it is what it is. Now, obviously looking at the front, we're kind of used to this design with the screen kind of bleeding over the edges, but at the time, this was the first Samsung Galaxy S series phone to bring this. The Galaxy Note Edge kind of brought up the whole edged panel screen thing, but this phone actually brought it on the Galaxy S series and brought it to a much larger scale. And I remember seeing the Galaxy S6 Edge out in real life and everything, and I'm like, man, this thing looks super crazy. And at a certain point, I'm like, why would anybody even want that? There's really no that much use to it if you think about it. And I'm still kind of in that same category. I don't think there's crazy things going on with it. I don't really think you need it, but I like what Samsung eventually did with the Galaxy S8 and so on and so forth, with the edge bleeding over with all the devices, not necessarily just the Galaxy S, the bigger one or whatever. So in terms of that, I think Samsung really kind of knocked it out of the park, because the Galaxy S6 Edge kind of revolutionized the rest of the screen, kind of bending on the sides. Even though the Note Edge kind of, made it, I guess the Galaxy S6 Edge popularized it in a way. And obviously, like I said, glass on the back, you have a micro USB port on the bottom and a headphone jack. So that pretty much covers out the outside and pretty much how it's been holding up. And even though there's a lot of bezel on it and it doesn't look premium, it definitely still feels very premium in the hands. That's something that I truly respect of it. Now, turning it on, we actually do have Android Nougat, which is one of those things that truly does suck. It never got Android Oreo, and I was praying to God that I hope it did, and it didn't. And I made a video last year saying RIP to the Galaxy S6, but the Galaxy S6 Edge at the same time also got unsupported, so that's a super annoying thing. I wish they never did that, but all hope is not lost. One cool thing about the Galaxy S6 Edge is that you are able to root and custom ROM some variants of them, but there's a humongous caveat with this, and like I said, there's only certain variants you can. I'm sure with the Verizon AT&T variants you are, but I would not even take that as fact. Go to xda.com or xda/developers, whatever, and find out for yourself whether the Galaxy S6 Edge is supported or not. I will leave links in the description for it. What I can tell you is that from what I'm seeing on a bird's eye view level, there are some Android Oreo ROMs out for it. So if you're wanting to get an Android Oreo experience on a Galaxy S6 Edge, you are able to get that from this. So that's super cool. There's also Android Pie ROMs out for this thing. Now, I don't know how stable those things are. I would probably recommend you to stay away from them, but if that's something that kind of interests you, this phone does support custom ROM and root capabilities. So not only will you be able to gain all those root functions, I forgot the thing, what it's called, XDA, it's not XDA, whatever that thing is, where that it's Cydia for your iPhone. You can get that on Galaxy S6 Edge. But on top of that, I mean, the custom ROMs are so much better than TouchWiz, and this phone is not supported on One UI, so this was still the software that Samsung had that just wasn't that good, and I never really liked it. Thankfully, Samsung's moving away from that, but in terms of the Galaxy S6 Edge and the custom ROMs for it, I would really recommend you to custom ROM your phone. And of course, do your own research. I will leave a link in the description that links you to XDA forums and takes you to exactly the Galaxy S6 Edge page. So if you're familiar with how to navigate their page, go to Galaxy S6 Edge Original Android Development or Galaxy S6 Edge Android development, whichever one, and do your own research there. But yeah, in terms of custom ROM ability of it, I would highly recommend you to do it. I would not recommend you to keep it stock because this thing is very, very behind. It's like at least like 2 years behind in updates. So, and Android 10's coming out this year too. So you might as well go back and just custom ROM this thing, man. Now, in terms of performance, okay, this is one of those things where I'm like in the middle because the specs on paper make it seem much better than it really is. So it has an Exynos 7420 octa chipset, an octa-core CPU, and 3 gigs of RAM. And the performance isn't horrible, okay? I'll leave it at that. It's not bad at all. This thing can definitely be able to get you from point A to point B. There are some, I wouldn't say glitched frames, but the animations, like when you click something, it just takes like a minute for it to open. And that's one of those things that really irks me because I'm one of those people that's like, I have the capability of buying the latest and greatest, but not everyone does. And I don't want to recommend something to someone who maybe wants to feel like they have the latest and greatest. And this is one of those phones that feels like you have the latest and greatest in hardware, but in terms of the overall performance of it, I think you might feel like you're getting left behind a little bit, especially if you keep it stock. If you custom ROM it, you will probably end up getting much better performance than what I was getting on it. But again, if you keep it stock, that like what I'm guessing most people are going to do, you would probably be disappointed. You won't be disappointed in the performance. I'll say it's like a 6.9 out of 10. It's almost like a 7 out of 10. It's not amazing. But again, I'm factoring in the age. If this phone was released now, and I'm not the only one, I see a lot of complaints about it. And again, you have to keep in mind that I usually don't use these phones like extremely thorough. I mean, I download apps, I test them, multitask, all those things. But a lot of people who have these phones for like more than a year or two say these things are super slow and they're sluggish and this and that. So if you currently have a Galaxy S6 Edge or if you had one in the past, go ahead and leave your experiences down in the comment section below so other people can hear about the longevity of this phone in a way. So in my opinion, I think the performance is okay. I mean, like gaming and everything, you're going to be fine. Heavier intensive games, there probably will be glitched frames here and there. But the one thing that I've always had problems with, especially with the Galaxy S6 and even the S6 Edge, is that it does heat up a little bit. It's not the end of the world, but it does kind of annoy me a little bit, especially when you're gaming. If you're heavy intensive gaming, you're going to get this thing heating up in your hands. So probably bring some cool pads with you or whatever those things are to ice your hands down. But in terms of the overall performance, I would probably rate it like a 6.9 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10. Now switching to the camera, this thing has a single sensor on the back. It's 16 megapixels, and I'll tell you that I really like this camera. You know, if I was kind of bashing it on the performance, the camera definitely makes up for it. It does have optical image stabilization. You can shoot 4K videos on it. You can only shoot 1080p at up to 60 frames per second, but it's really not that big of a deal. I think the camera on this thing was super solid, and Samsung has a tendency with a lot of their phones, they like overexpose the photos, but they do it in such a good way. Like it's not just like overexposing it, like just increasing the brightness. It like makes the colors pop a lot more, and this might have something to do with the screen itself as well. But every time I look at these photos and everything, it looks so good. And I think the camera is still one of the best parts about this phone. One thing that I really don't like about the camera is how much it sticks out from the outside. So if you just lean it against the table without like putting a case on it, it'll just be able to like, it's just like rock everywhere, which is kind of annoying, but it's really not that big of a deal. The photos and videos this thing takes are still super good. So what I'll tell you is the back camera is super solid. The front camera is 5 megapixels, and I don't really like the front camera on this thing. I know that kind of sucks because, you know, it's like they do such a good job with the back camera. Then the front camera, they always like so many manufacturers mess it up. But what I can tell you is that it's not horrible. It'll definitely get the job done. But I have for sure seen better front cameras on like mid-range, like lower flagship phones this year, even like 2018, 2017, than what I've seen with the Galaxy S6 Edge. So kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. That's my experience, but it is what it is. Now, this last thing I want to talk about, which is battery life, is one of those things that actually is not really that good on this device. It is a 2,600 mAh battery, and if you looked at it like that, you would probably say it's like mid-range, probably a little bit below average. But the fact that this thing had a pretty large screen, this wasn't like amazingly big, but had a pretty large screen, the software on it wasn't that good. And on top of that, this thing came out almost 4 years ago, so you have to keep in mind that the battery has degraded 100%. Not 100% degraded, but it has degraded some percentage. If I had to put a percent on it, I would probably say this all has to do with how much the person used the phone. If you're buying it used, how much they use it and everything, I would probably say it at least degraded like 20%. So it's not 2,600 mAh anymore. It's probably like 2,000 or even probably less than that, which really does suck because there's really nothing you can do about it. And to replace the battery on this phone is a pretty long process. You can't just open the back. I mean, you have to like take out all the screws and do all those other things, and it's just a mess. I really wish they just kept the removable battery, but whatever. I will say if I took my usage and put it on this phone, I would definitely have to charge it by the end of the day. Probably charge it around like 5, 6 o'clock, something like that. this thing probably would not be able to last me throughout a day. And one thing that I've noticed is that because this phone does heat up, usually when the phone is heating up like that much, the battery life goes down quite a bit too. And it's just super annoying. I wish it wasn't like that. But again, it's like, what are you going to do? You can replace the battery. I guess you can get a battery case, but it's kind of what it is. And I guess they sacrificed the premiumness and the thinness of this phone in order to give up like some battery percentage, which in the long run wasn't really a good deal. And some other things to note, this phone does have wireless charging, so you are able to just put it on a mat and just go on with your life, so that's a super cool thing. And like I said, you do have front and back glass, so that's super, super awesome. The screen is super nice. It does bleed to the edges. You do have the headphone jack for those people who want it, and no card slots, no removable batteries, but you do have the option to custom ROM this thing for some variants. So again, do your own research and figure all that stuff out. But would I recommend the Galaxy S6 Edge in 2019? What I will tell you is, if there's a specific reason why you're buying this specific phone, so if like one of your friends selling it to you for really cheap, or this is the only option you have, it's either this or nothing, obviously take it, okay? But for everyone else, I mean, these things are still fairly expensive, and I say that all the time with all the phones because they're always in the same price bracket. It's still fairly expensive to get this phone, and it's not like $300 or anything, but there's still, I mean, around that $100 mark. I've seen some for cheaper, seen some for more expensive. So what I would tell you is that instead of getting the Galaxy S6 Edge, I would probably recommend like a Google Pixel. Those things are still very, very premium. They feel great in the hands, and even though there's a little bit more bezel to it, those things are still supported with software for a little bit, and you're still able to maintain the fingerprint sensor, a better one at that, an AMOLED screen, and you have more options of custom ROMing, and you have a great camera on that as well. So what I'll tell you is I'll link a Google Pixel in the description below, but I'll also link a Galaxy S6 Edge. I would probably recommend you to pick up a Google Pixel instead of the Galaxy S6 Edge, but that's pretty much my opinion on it, guys. And that's pretty much it. If you have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also, check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I would really, really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.